You need to make sure that you create yourself as the best leader that you can. And that's by, learning lots of things, doing personal development, breaking through trauma cycles that you may have had, making sure that you are the best fit.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody, what if I told you that the secret to extraordinary leadership isn't found in the boardrooms of Silicon Valley or the MBA programs of Harvard, but around a dinner table where refugees, exchange students, and foster children are sharing stories from around the world? Today's guest learned his most powerful leadership lessons, not from textbooks, but from navigating over 60 nationalities, singing in prisons as an 11-year-old, and discovering that the ancient Japanese art of consensus building might just be the missing piece in modern Western leadership. On today's podcast, we're pleased to welcome John Taylor McEntire, who set out to become not a global leadership expert, but he started as a kid who learned that strength comes from shared humanity. And now he's an adult who fell in love with the Japanese culture, and he evolved his theories into what is something entirely new, the Sync method. And that is explained in his new upcoming book, Sync to the Beat of Success. So grab your passport for this conversation. We're about to explore how authenticity, cultural synchronicity, and servant leadership can transform how you lead and who you become in the process. John, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I really appreciate being here.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it also. I think this book has a lot of potential, a lot of very profound concepts for us to explore, and it's very unique too. And of course, it all comes from your background and your experiences growing up. So I think it's important to start there and know a little bit about what led you to writing this book in general. So if you don't mind giving us a quick overview of some of these experiences. I talked about some of them, but there's a lot of gaps, I'm sure. So tell us a little about it. What's that connecting thread that led you to writing your book throughout your life?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I appreciate the introduction that you gave. So I think that where I'm at right now is that all these different aspects of my life brought me to this point, and it's at a point where I need to be sharing, knowledge and experience, help myself, you know, fulfill what I think my mission is, and that is to help other people getting buy-in from their teams and helping leaders recognize how culture is a really key part to, bringing that team together. So I'll just get into it.
Yeah.
I grew up in a home that was very unique, and at the time, when you're growing up, you don't know how unique something is, but we constantly had a barrage of different types of people in the house. And so you could say that I grew up at the United Nations dining table. And um, we had foreign exchange students from Japan and Germany, Uruguay, had humanitarian refugees from Laos, a family that left Laos during a civil war, had foster brothers who were Navajo, from the Navajo tribe, and really a whole plethora of people. My father just would constantly be bringing people back. He was an orthopedic surgeon, and so he would meet people at the hospital. Sometimes somebody that was skiing, because I grew up in Utah, so we had ski resorts all over the place. But somebody was skiing, had an accident, and my dad started talking to them, and they were from New York, and they brought them over, and then people who had been recently released from prison. I mean, it was a whole plethora of people. It was not just, all these people would think was upstanding people, but it was people of all these different beliefs and different situations. And from that aspect, I learned that everybody was really um, an important piece of this puzzle of life that we have, and that somehow we need to be able to mesh together better so that our puzzle pieces fit more succinctly and more naturally together. Also, by the time I was 22, because my parents liked to travel, and they felt that travel was a way that we could learn about history and culture and just learn more about ourselves. By the age of 22, I had traveled to dozens of countries and all 50 states and 8 provinces and territories in Canada. And so this gave me a real view of, even a short distance from home, a couple states over, you have a different culture, you have a different set of people, you have a different type of city structure, a different type of community. One other aspect about community, and community was really important in regards to how I have become somebody who feels that community and culture is something that's really important for leaders. When I was 9, my first intuitive moment, and that was sitting on the sofa after dinner on Sunday. My parents had invited a friend over. That friend had been in a musical the night before at the Playhouse in town. We had seen her, and she and my mom were talking about how fun the theater was. And she was just talking about theater life and all these different things that she was doing. And towards the end of that discussion, she told my mom, she goes, Nancy, there's going to be tryouts for The Sound of Music, and that'll be in about a month. You ought to come. And my mom just, pushed it off and says, oh, I could never do that. Well, that discussion just really hit something in my heart. And I felt that I was supposed to go to this thing. So I told my parents that I'm supposed to be at this tryout. And they just patted me on the head and said, John, that's really nice and everything, but you've never sung before and you don't talk to people. So how could you get on the stage? So they just dismissed it. And, daily, at dinner, during carpool or whatever, I would bring it up. And finally, a couple days before that, I said, if you don't take me, I'm going to go there myself. And I'll take the bus. And that would have taken me through a really dangerous part of town. So they took me, and I got on the stage, and out came this big voice. And the hundreds of people in, the auditorium, they just went dead silent. And I knew at that point that music and theater was going to be something that was really important for my life. And it was a way to touch people's hearts. But what I learned in the theater was really from the green room. And what I learned as a 9-year-old in the green room was that if everybody's gelling and there's just a real camaraderie and everybody's wanting to see everybody succeed and everything, you knew it was going to be an A+ show. But if there was, bickering, backbiting, petty jealousies, you knew it was going to be a B- or less. And so it all really came down to the director. So theater is really a community, and it's a city that has a mayor. The mayor is the director, and this director really just sees how all these parts fit together. So when I first started in the theater, I thought, oh, those stars, the names on the marquee was really important. But I came to learn that every single part was important. So the people who did the costumes up until 3 in the morning, the people who did the lights and the sound, the music, the villagers, of course, the stars, the orchestra, the people who wrote the script, everybody was really important to make that puzzle really whole. And however much people were allowed to be themselves in putting their parts out, that made the show that much greater. So that became really important in regards to how I would lead teams in the future, and really my philosophy in regards to where we're at now with the book Sync. And so this idea of culture being important, community being important, was really what started this whole thing off in regards to how I created my leadership style.
Well, wow. Thank you for running us through everything that's shaped this. I think it's so important, especially when we're talking to authors, that we see where they're coming from and what they've learned throughout their lives. And that's definitely a huge, landslide of different events for you. And I guess it's all what accumulated to become the sync method. So tell us a little bit more about that. How did you develop this framework? Why did you choose this particular acronym?
So thanks for asking about the acronym. It's SYNC, SYNC, synchronize yourself naturally within your community. So another part of my background was that I went to university for 1 semester, and then I took 2 years off, and I was a missionary for my church in Japan. And at this time, I just fell in love with Japan. And I was trying to figure out how come the Japanese, Tokyo was one of the largest cities in the world at the time. And people were living in what they call rabbit hutches because everybody's on top of each other and just like cages. And so how could people be so close, paper thin walls, and still be able to reside as a community? And I learned that consensus was really, a big part of the Japanese psyche. And so this is where Kaizen comes from. Continual improvement is really a consensus building process. Six Sigma is based off of these types of principles. And so I felt that consensus was really a big part. That's where the synchronization comes in. And synchronize is really, what are you synchronizing? You're synchronizing language. So are you all speaking the same language, in your different departments? Are you building a culture that everybody can work together for? Are you synchronizing your systems and everything to make sure that you're breaking the curse of Babel? So Babel, had these language issues, but it was more than language issues. It was systematic issues. They weren't able to get things together to finish the big project that they had. So I help these organizations break the curse of Babel. Then yourself, you need to think of sync as a pyramid or a triangle. And the top part is the S, and then you have the Y in the middle, and then on the sides you have naturally and community. And so yourself is in the center, and you need to make sure that you create yourself as the best leader that you can, and that's by learning lots of things, doing personal development, breaking through trauma cycles that you may have had, making sure that you are the best fit to be able to do that. And I'm a Jack Canfield Success Principles methodology trainer. And so a lot of what comes out of the success principles is really this yourself part and personalizing that aspect. The naturalize is, as I noted, that I had that intuitive moment in, when I was 9 years old, and that was one of many throughout my whole career. That naturalize is, how do you take things that are maybe outside us so that we don't necessarily understand, how do you utilize those better? So part of that is intuition. Part of it is, I've done a lot of work with people in Korea, and they have what's called nunchi, and nunchi is how to read a room. And so taking aspects like that, or taking Eastern principles of Nemawashi, or aspects of things from Chinese culture, from Indian culture. There's lots of different things that help us, but we need to be able to take that in a context of those historical things, those cultural things, and work on weighing out the Western pragmatism versus the Eastern philosophy, and try and mold those things together. And then community is really, really important in regards to how do we build harmony and how do we make sure that the team is working well together.
Well, it's super inspiring to know that you've just been able to combine all these different aspects to it. And thank you for walking us through the whole acronym and everything in between. I think it's a great way to allow the audience to get a good understanding of what sync is and how it can best be applied to them. And thank you for explaining that, the Japanese business philosophy into it. It's kind of cool how you're able to kind of, um, wrap it all up together. Um, so there's also a couple other things that your book does touch upon, like the orbs of influence concept, for example. You talked a little bit about the curse of Babel, but I don't think we got into the orbs of influence too much there. I'm wondering if you want to shine a light on that a little bit.
Sure. So the orbs of influence is really, again, you're in the center. As you move outward, you've got you and your internal group. And then you have those people that are external to your group, which could be, outside of your department or whatever, or it could be outside your company, people who do things as subcontractors or a virtual assistant or whatever. You need to make sure that you help them understand that you're on this path together. And so as you build these orbs of influence, get everybody close together and get them on the same page, using the same language, and going towards the same mission. So even though you have people outside your providers, service providers or vendors, make sure that they're actually included as part of your board, let's say.
Right.
And so this board of advisors, if they feel like they're part of your board and that they understand what your mission is, it's much easier for them to fulfill what they're supposed to do to make you successful so you can make them successful. So it's always a mutual aspect of sharing these responsibilities and sharing the results. And so my company name is Mutual Prosperity, and that's basically everybody building towards the same goal. And then somehow we're going to be mutually prosperous. We work together, we succeed together, and then you need to be sharing in that. I take that same sense of negotiation world. You know, if you're having a negotiation, you need to make sure that it's really level and that one group is not getting the benefit over the other. Because when there's disparity like that, then there's resentment. And that resentment actually makes things more difficult. So the orbs of influence are how you work internally, but also how you work externally and how you get that to your clients.
Understood. Thank you for, shining a light on that and explaining it a little bit more to us. There's a lot to consider here and a lot to wrap your mind around, but I guess that's why you have the book and people can be excited to read a little bit more about it when it comes out and really dive into the details of it. And, kind of transitioning a little bit into the writing process itself, I know your book also has a lot of personal stories and anecdotes that go along with this business advice. So how on earth did you manage balancing those stories with the advice and laying it out so clearly? You must have had a specific writing process as you went into this. Is that correct?
Well, the book has been in the process for several years, and
Right.
it actually started when I was working with a set of coaches, and one of the coaches was Jack Canfield from the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, and he's also, of course, the Success Principles person, and so this is how I got involved with Jack at first, and at that time, I was telling him I was going to do a book on consensus building, and as he was guiding me, and he's become a very, very important mentor of mine. And I've become a trainer for his organization. His helping me understand and look at things from a different perspective where he wasn't seeing how I could actually do a book just on consensus building. And maybe I could have, but I don't think it would have been very interesting. And so the reason why this took time was because I needed to get to know myself a little bit better. Because up to that point, I'd been working for 35 years for other groups, other companies, other organizations around the world. And so I had been using Ningi Sato type aspects. This is Japanese consensus building aspect in how you do decision making from around the group rather than the top down, and also the talking about language and culture and everything, bringing all those things together.
Right.
So Jack was able to help me get out of my head about thinking of it in one way, and then ultimately helping me understand that it's more than that. In the meantime, working with Jack, I got the certification to be a trainer for him. And that's where I started to understand that these different elements needed to be in there and they need to be distinct so that you could ultimately put them together as this puzzle and make things work out. So along the way, as things built and everything, and as I've gone through the book, this is really the third rendition of the book. Now I feel like it's at a point where it makes more sense. So the stories and everything are really important because it helps people understand from a personal perspective, how this may fit with them, even though the stories are going to be different for each person. The fact that there is a mechanism or some way of progression is really important because we're always in a progressive mode if we're really wanting to succeed.
Understood. Thanks for laying that out for us. And I like how you maintain that careful balance too, while keeping all of that into consideration. Very powerful stuff there. I love it. But now that you have the book pretty much ready to go, everyone could be excited to see it released in December. I think it's important for us to talk about kind of your vision and your impact. What do you hope that readers will do differently after reading this book?
Well, I hope that they look at the world a little bit differently and look at the people as really that puzzle piece. So one of the key components to this is that everybody's a puzzle piece in life, but they're also a puzzle piece in the organization. And when you think about human resources, so a company is starting to grow and they need to hire people, and or somebody's left and they need to fill that position, there's a little space that's open for that position. And so the company needs to recognize that somebody is going to come and fill that space up, but they're most likely going to be able to do more than that space. And so as a leader, we need to be able to give them margin around that space so that they can ultimately grow into that. And then by doing that, we dovetail all these different pieces together. And as people feel that they're being valued because they're not just doing that box, okay, but they're actually able to give part of themselves to that position, the leader gets buy-in from them. Once you get that buy-in from them, then you've got them excited and ready to roll, and they're really wanting to give themselves. It's not necessarily that the titles and the money are what's driving them anymore. It's really this creative engine, this innovation that's connected to other people and feeling like they're valuable. And again, those puzzle pieces are going to be coming more so than ever before from different places around the world. And so we need to understand that people with a Western education versus people with an Eastern education um, have uh, have issues in their minds. We need to understand as leaders how they think, because how they think is really, really important. How they grew up with a teacher or a master, a sensei, they're treating those teachers differently than the people in the Western world do. I've had clients who have said, I don't know why these people that I've hired, maybe from Asia or from the Middle East, why I feel like I'm giving them directions and instructions to do things, and I feel like they're not doing anything. They're not giving me any questions. And I said, well, sometimes the people, the way they were born or the way they grew up and were educated, in their part of the world, they wouldn't question a teacher, they wouldn't question the leader. And
Mhm.
so they're looking for a little bit more direction. And I'll tell them, you just need to, sit down with them and talk through your philosophy and how you work, understand how they're thinking, and then you can kind of mesh things together. But that's how you get those puzzle pieces to work together. So that's what I would say is the puzzle piece is really important, and giving that margin is something that allows the whole organization to grow and meld together.
Understood. I like that. That's that final puzzle piece that we all need. So great. Once people read the book, they'll finally have it. And that's just very inspiring to know. So I appreciate that. And thank you so much for putting this whole, method together. I think a lot of people are really going to learn from it and open their eyes into different ways that different cultures can really shape their leadership and shape their businesses and their lives in general too. So now that we have all this gathered and put, out on the page, where's the best place for people to head to and learn a little bit more about the sync method and about your upcoming projects, perhaps? Where can they be connected?
So the place that I'm the most active is LinkedIn, and that's John Taylor McEntire is my LinkedIn name, and then also John-Taylor-McEntire.com is the company, and so they could check in both of those places. And I'm posting a lot on the sync method, and it's really how you get alignment and both internally and externally, and how you build inclusion within your organization and deal with strategy, and how does intuition build with that strategy. But that's those are the types of things that I talk about on LinkedIn.
Understood. Well, perfect. Well, make sure to put the links in the description box of this podcast today so everybody could go ahead and click on over and get to learn a little bit more about all that. I love it. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been a fascinating conversation. You've really had a diverse range of experiences and have really taught so many people that, through the sync method and all of this. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thanks for having this channel.
Of course, yeah. And to all of our listeners, just remember, go ahead and check out the book. And until next time, just keep writing, keep growing, and keep discovering that authenticity isn't about being genuine. It's about having the courage to tell your real experience, become the foundation for work that truly matters. And if John taught us anything, right, learning from your experiences, helping others through it. So, yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. And to all of our listeners, we'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.